Hello, and welcome back to another episode of AWS Review, our weekly look at what's happening at AWS and how it might change your business. I am your host, Michael Krause. I am the Chief Technology Officer at Charter Solutions, where we help organizations change and innovate quickly by accelerating the acquisition and use of data.
And I'm your co-host, John Affolter. So I'm a senior sales engineer at Charter Solutions, where I help potential customers and help them envision the possibilities that AWS enables. Great to have you again.
All right, it's been an interesting weekend. We got all the way up to 74 degrees, and now it seems like we're back in winter again.
I know we joke about this each week, and it's kind of it's getting pretty crazy at this point. But I feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel here, and I'm excited to get out on the bike here a little bit. And get out
My
of the
fear is
cold.
that we're actually causing this by talking about it every week.
You know what? You know me. I definitely believe in that. You can't put that out in the universe. So
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Well, there's been a lot of stuff happening with AWS, a lot of interesting stuff. So that's really cool. I think we've got quite a few things to talk about today.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, before we move on to our topic, which is going to be cloud native versus cloud agnostic versus multi-cloud, which is going to be a pretty loaded topic for us. I know we'll have a lot of stuff to talk about, but let's take a look at what's been happening at AWS over the last week. Um, the first thing that I noticed was that Amazon Athena does ACID transactions now, powered by Apache Iceberg. So, instead of just being able to just create a new table, it now gives you capabilities to do writes, deletes, updates, and even time travel operations with Athena's SQL data manipulation language. So uh, this is definitely a game changer in a couple different paradigms. And Michael, what do you think about just how this might change how people are working with Athena?
So it's interesting. So a few years ago at one of the reInvent conferences, Amazon announced that they'd done a study of what is the most used language in corporate
Mhm.
America. And what they found was structured query language, SQL, was the most used language and the most known language. So they decided to take a push on how do we engage and leverage SQL to make life easier across the board. And as part of that, they've released a lot of things like Particle, which allows you to use SQL to query
Mhm.
DynamoDB and a number of other databases. But this is big because if you think about the traditional kind of data lake on AWS approach, a lot of your curation is done by Glue and
Yeah.
writing PySpark or Python, things like that.
Mhm.
You could do some things by using Athena and the create table as command in there. But what this does is this opens the door a little bit more to be able to do more fine grained changes to data in the data lake, leveraging SQL and Athena. So it kind of brings the bar down a little lower in creating ETL type code via SQL and running it in Athena and making minor updates. So I think this is going to be a game changer in a lot of ways as people
Mhm.
play with it and explore and learn what they can do with it. It's going to create some more efficiencies, and I think it's going to create more agility as well.
Yeah, and I think too, it'll basically give power to a business analyst that might know SQL really well but doesn't know Python or anything
Yep.
like that. So definitely, I think that's something that does really well, is democratize the ability to work on large sets of data. And I guess that kind of segues me into the next update, which is that now Amazon SageMaker does serverless inference. So no more having to spin up Docker containers and having to worry about that. And having a maximum concurrent invocation per endpoint is 200. So, I think that really, one of those things where it democratizes data science. And the big problem with data science is always, all right, this model works great in my notebook, but now I have to go and make it into a production level model, and that can always be an interesting problem to have. So it
Yeah.
definitely kind of takes a lot of headaches away, which all serverless does.
I love listening to Simon on the AWS podcast, and he always says, let AWS do the undifferentiated heavy lifting, right?
Yep.
When it comes to running ML models, I would say there's probably very few companies who are differentiating themselves in the marketplace by being able to run SageMaker on containers or EC2.
Mhm.
So for Amazon to be able to come to the table and say, guess what, we'll take that load off you, we'll do that, manage all of that infrastructure for you, and we'll give you a serverless model to run this. I think that's great. I believe they were only running about a max of 50 concurrent invocations during preview. So that's
Mhm.
a nice big jump 4 times to get it into
Yeah.
as they went live, gone GA with it. So this is exciting. It'll be interesting to see how people leverage this again. It's AWS always brings these things to market, and I'm always impressed
Mhm.
by the interesting and unique ways people find to leverage it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So another announcement is that Aurora Serverless version 2 has finally gone GA. So it's generally available. Um, I've used Aurora Serverless version 2 quite a bit. I've had a lot of deep conversations with AWS architects about challenges with Aurora Serverless 1. And I am so excited. The ability to scale your database in seconds rather than minutes is amazing. The fact that they now support finer grain scaling, in the past it was always you double, right? You
Yep.
went from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16. So now they've got finer grain scaling steps. They've got faster scaling. So you're not going to run into these, connection overloads when you have a high peak. That's kind of unexpected. So again, amazing. I'm excited to go and play with that one as well.
Absolutely. And, just another thing that kind of unveils a lot of operational issues is now you can automatically detect issues in Lambda functions with Amazon DevOps Guru for serverless. So, utilizing machine learning to be able to figure out where those issues are going to come ahead of time. And, to be able to do this, you don't need to be a serverless or a machine learning expert. So really kind of putting more power into people and really making an engineer be able to be multifaceted really quickly in an
Yeah.
organization. So,
And we've used AWS Code Guru to do performance monitoring on
mhm.
Lambdas, looking at CPU usage, looking at profiling. We've actually got some Java code that's running in Lambda. So we were doing profiling in the Java code and heap usage profiling to try to find memory leaks. And that's kind of a pain to get all that stuff configured and then start using it. Not a terrible pain, but there's some effort there. To have something that can now automatically look at it and based on learnings from the past, come back and say, okay, we're starting to see things that are going to turn into issues.
Mhm.
So predictively finding those things, I think is a very great thing.
Yeah, especially
Uh,
when you're going at a million miles an hour and it's just a whole nother time crunch that you have to include in your day that now it's something that you don't have to think about as much. So,
yep. And it's we deal with a lot of high scale situations.
mhm.
And the problem that we always run into is 80% of the time it's predictable. There's a ramp up, there's a ramp down, there's typically some cyclical thing that occurs.
Mhm.
But the 20% of the time is when something happens where somebody needs to drop a million items on it at one time, right?
Yep.
And suddenly you're trying to figure out how do I make this scale from nothing to a million all at once.
Yeah.
So having
Trying to plug the
visibility into
holes on
these
the
things
ship.
helps. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. The last thing I think we have on our agenda today to talk about with regard to AWS news is EventBridge Global Endpoints. So Amazon's been making a lot of changes to EventBridge and making it a
Yeah.
much more robust platform for event-driven applications and architectures. And one of the things they've released recently is global endpoints that allow you to automatically fail over from one region to another in situation where you've got service disruptions in a region.
Yeah.
So you can now spread some of your event-driven work across multiple regions, have one region be primary, but have Event Bridge automatically fail to the other region and invoke lambdas or other things in another region so that you've got continuous availability.
Yeah, I think that'll be huge. And one of the things with AWS is there's a lot of nuances working cross region, and this is something that really makes kind of that global event driven architecture a lot easier to implement and
Yes,
do it at scale. So
absolutely.
so yeah, I guess to further ado, let's move over to our very heavily loaded topic here. So I guess I guess I'll start off with asking you kind of just defining the terms of what is cloud native, what is cloud agnostic, and what is multi-cloud.
Excellent. So, all right. So talking about AWS Cloud Native versus cloud agnostic versus multi-cloud, you hear these terms bounced around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not going to try to tell you what the absolute definition is because I'm sure there will people who differ with me, but this is the definition we're going to use for this conversation. So, AWS Cloud Native implies that we are heavily leveraging AWS specific technologies in building the architecture out. So, for example, building it on top of AWS Lambda, AWS Kinesis, DynamoDB, things like that, things that don't exist as exactly the same thing in other clouds, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we say, oh, we're going to use Postgres, right? Well, Postgres is available on Microsoft Azure, it's on Google Cloud Platform, and it's on AWS. But so when we talk about cloud native, we talk about freedom of leveraging items that are unique to a particular cloud to get the benefits that they bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Cloud agnostic means I have built something that I can very easily port from one cloud to another, right? So common databases and containerization is a common mechanism for that, whether it's Docker, Docker Swarm, or Kubernetes, plus, things like MySQL or Postgres. You build an application that way, and you can minimize the cost of moving it from one platform to another very easily. It's agnostic. It doesn't for the most part care. It's difficult to get it down to zero because you still have to get it deployed, and oftentimes there's some unique things in the setup to get deployment working between the different clouds, but oftentimes you can capture that in tools like Terraform. But what you're doing is you're minimizing what has to change so that you can run it potentially on multiple cloud platforms simultaneously. Which then brings me to multi-cloud. Multi-cloud means I'm running on multiple platforms. And I want to be cautious here because there is an apparent gray area and overlap between cloud agnostic and multi-cloud.
Yep.
So cloud agnostic, I can run it on multiple platforms. But typically in cloud agnostic, I'm either migrating from one platform to another, or I'm running separate instances that are somewhat independent of each other on the different platforms. Multi-cloud means I'm running my solution across multiple cloud platforms.
Yep.
Right. So think about if an AWS region goes down, I can fail over to an Azure region.
Yep.
Right. Or a Google Cloud region or something like that. So that's where multi-cloud kind of really, when people talk multi-cloud, they're really talking about how do I spread my risk across multiple clouds from a global presence and operations and disaster recovery, availability kind of perspective.
Yep. How about in the sense of, hey, maybe I'm using Azure to host my site, but I'm using AWS for the machine learning purposes and kind of divvying up the workloads based on which cloud does which one the best, or maybe there's some skill sets within your team or a myriad of different reasons.
Yeah, that's so that's a strategy some people use, and they might lump that under multi-cloud. But typically, what I say is that's really usually cloud native, You're just doing it on 2 different clouds.
Yep.
Right? It's like I rent 2 storage units from 2 different companies. That doesn't mean I'm multi-storage unit. It means I have 2 storage units.
Yep.
I use them for different things, right? And what we found also is that while certain clouds appear to be a little better at something than other clouds, in the short term, that's true. In the long term, that's ephemeral, because there is a lot of competition, and they're constantly the new changes people make suddenly become table stakes for the other ones.
Yep.
So what you look at today that one cloud might have, guess what? The other ones are going to have it, very quickly. AWS came out with Lambda. It was an amazing tool. Suddenly we have Azure functions. We've got Google Cloud's, concept as well. They all exist now, right? So the fear of if I don't go there, I won't get that is a fear that doesn't have a strong foundation.
Yep.
You'll get that. It just might be 6 months before it arrives there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've seen with clients that sometimes, for example, Google, they throw out a lot of free consulting, and they do a lot of price breaks and stuff like that. So sometimes that can influence a company's direction in choosing a cloud vendor. But then, just recently, Google just increased all of their prices, and now those same customers are like, oh wow, all the reason that I went to Google in the first place is kind of starting to go away. So you see it as a continuing trend, I guess, and just people are just Azure and Google trying to grab market share.
Yeah. So if you go look at market share on this, AWS still leads by a dramatic amount. And if you've ever read Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm, Inside the Tornado, the Gorilla Game, anything like that. One of the things that he's shown through case study after case study is that once you establish yourself as the dominant leader in a market, it is very, very, very difficult to usurp you, right?
Yep.
The way you get usurped is by people going around you and creating a brand new innovation and make you old school, right? You're now the old way of doing it. We're now the new way of doing it. But when you go head on, it's very hard. So you're going to see the competitors to AWS constantly doing things to try to draw market share away, right? One of the things that we've seen people bitten by on Azure, and this isn't necessarily a ding against Azure, but it's just a reality that we run into, is they advertise costs out there that are lower than AWS. But when you get in, we've seen this over and over again. You get in there and you start building something, and you're like, okay, I need to do this. They say, oh, yeah, well, that's a premium feature.
Yep.
So you'll have to bump up to the premium use of that. And then this. And then all of a sudden we're paying way more than we were on AWS. So there's marketing games that are going on, whether it's I'm giving you heavy discounts, I'm giving you free stuff, all of this stuff, and to be honest, all of them are doing it, right? Amazon's been known to put free money out there as well. Amazon partners will oftentimes get funded by Amazon to go do some free work for a customer to help get them on Amazon. So it's an interesting game, but that's not a long game, right?
Yep.
You still have to be cautious. And the multi-cloud concept that you brought forward of, I have some workloads over here and I have some workloads over here. What you run into there is diffusion of expertise.
Yep.
So if you've got a group of people who are, so here's the classic one I see. We're going to move all of our Active Directory, our Microsoft Office management, our shares and file servers and all that stuff to Microsoft Azure. And we're going to do all of our product development and all of our data and analytics stuff and all of that stuff on AWS. That's actually a common pattern I've seen.
Yep, absolutely.
That actually typically rides an expertise shift, because oftentimes the people in an organization who are managing your network and your servers and stuff like that people use for back office work are Microsoft experts, because Microsoft owns that world, right? But on the product side, that's not necessarily the case. right?
Yep.
So I've seen that split quite a bit. But I'm also seeing a lot of these places come over to AWS because AWS has got offerings that compete very well with those as well, but it's just not as comfortable.
Yep.
So that's always something you have to be cautious of.
Yeah, I think I think the final keep on with Microsoft is just that Active Directory and having everything tied to it already. It's but Amazon's
Which
made some
which is
great.
interesting. Amazon offers Amazon's Active Directory service.
Yep.
They actually offer full blown Microsoft Active Directory as
Yep.
well as a more lightweight one based on Samba.
Yep. And it just all comes down to people being familiar with it, and they've done a
Absolutely.
good job at making that a easy transition.
Yep.
So I guess that that's a good segue too of why would a company choose just a cloud native strategy versus cloud agnostic versus multi-cloud. I guess there's a bunch of different reasons, but I
Yeah.
guess just how about with cloud native? Why would you stick with AWS Cloud Native specifically?
Typically, it's cost and time to market.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about how quickly you can roll out, especially using something like the serverless framework, a full API that has code running in Lambda, hitting DynamoDB, it scales immensely. You can roll something like that out really fast by leveraging AWS native services. I don't have to spin up and provision a database. I don't have to build infrastructure to provision that database. DynamoDB, you just create a table and tell it how much throughput you want.
Yeah, or
Right?
have multiple, a database expert and this expert and that expert.
Exactly. Exactly. So speed, time to market, inherent scalability, long-term reduction of maintenance cost, right? If I'm managing my own database cluster, I have servers, I have operating systems, I have
Mhm.
the database software on top of that I have to manage, backup, upgrade, et cetera, right?
Yep.
I go to the other end of the spectrum and I look at something like DynamoDB, and now I've got something where I just interact with the table. I do nothing
Mhm.
else. I don't have to pay any of that cost internally or build any of that expertise.
Yep.
So your cost is much lower. Your time to market is much lower. Your operating cost is much lower. The complexities are much lower. All of that stuff. Amazon's shouldering a lot more of that.
Mhm.
So when you go to cloud agnostic and multi-cloud, it's interesting. I think there are a number of fears that people have that drive them to those things.
Yep. Well,
And I've
vendor
worked with a
lock-in
number
and
of CIOs who have looked at it and said, I need this to be cloud agnostic. I need it to be multi-cloud. And, when I delve into why,
Mhm.
it's fear, right? What if Amazon blows up and goes away? What do I do? I mean, we're talking business continuity and disaster recovery, right? But at the same time, these same organizations are heavily reliant on, you know, many single points of failure. What if
Mhm.
Microsoft blows up and goes away? What about all the
Yeah.
servers you've got, all the Microsoft Office dependency you have, Microsoft
Yep.
Windows on all your machines? That same thing exists. What you need to do is look at it differently and say, all right, what really is my risk here, right?
Yeah.
If Amazon had one region and one availability zone and that was it, yes, I would be concerned.
Yeah.
But, it's got 4 regions in the United States alone that you can fail over, geographically from
Yeah.
and do disaster recover. So geographical, spread is not the issue. Um, you know, it becomes hey, will this company survive?
Mhm.
Well, it's true. What phone company do you use? Who provides your servers today? All of that same thing. So I think there's a fear-based piece in that. And when I work with companies and we address those fears and we get those fears off the table, suddenly cloud native becomes something more important.
Yeah.
Now, there are scenarios where multi-cloud and cloud agnostic come to bear, and it's a little bit painful. And we see it when there is market pressure to use a particular
Yes.
vendor or to avoid a particular vendor,
Yeah.
right?
Retail or
Yeah, retail's big on that. Interestingly enough, you'd think that streaming would be, but the biggest competitor to Amazon Prime runs on Amazon.
Mhm.
from a video streaming perspective. So and they actually work together to make sure Amazon is a solid platform for them. So um, yeah, but you can't fight your customers,
Yeah.
right? So when your customers say, I don't want you running on Azure, or I won't use your product if it's running on Google, or I won't use your product
Yeah.
if it's running on AWS, you need to address that. And you
Yep.
can't address it by saying, oh, well, your worries are unfounded. You should just do it, right?
Yeah.
That's a longer term educational process that needs to occur. But that's the one area where I see cloud agnostic and multi-cloud coming into play.
Mhm.
I see it much less around other things. Now, that being said, um, if you feel that there is risk, you can start by being cloud native and set yourself up to minimize the blast radius of changing from one cloud to another,
Yep.
right? So, for example, let's say that in your architecture, in what you're building, you're using queues,
Mhm.
right? And you're going to use Amazon's SQS, simple queuing service,
Yep.
right? Well, one option is you write all your code talking to the Amazon API. Another option is you implement an adapter pattern and you build an interface in your code
Mhm.
that implements queuing semantics.
Yep.
And then that interface basically fronts an implementation for SQS. So now you say, well, I want to switch to RabbitMQ and stay on AWS. You take that object that implements SQS, make a copy of it, tie it
Mhm.
to RabbitMQ, implement the same interface, and now it's a simple swap.
Yep.
You know, we've done that recently with switching from Aurora to DynamoDB. We knew that Aurora wasn't going to be our long-term plan. We knew we were going to switch at some point in the future, but it was a
Mhm.
short-term opportunity for us. But the actual changeover only took a couple of days
Yeah.
because we had properly abstracted the code that is specific to Aurora out so we could swap it out with DynamoDB.
Yeah, and I think that's a general theme that I see too. And I saw I wish I would have grabbed it before, but I saw a new cloud maturity scale, and at the end of it, the last one is event driven service full is what it was called. So really kind of that idea of just having some sort of messaging layer that abstracts, and then you can mix and match with the cloud as long as you're
Yep.
doing your code in the right way, just like you said.
Yeah, I
And
think
I
we
guess
could do a whole session on event driven, probably a whole series of sessions on
yeah,
event driven.
yeah, and I guess that's the next thing too. I know we're of course we're running up on time here a little bit, but we knew that was going to happen. When people are building, whether it's cloud native, cloud agnostic, multi-cloud, what are some of the things, just like you had stated before, that you need to think about when you're maybe moving from a monolithic application to cloud native, for example? What are some of those things?
So knowing if you have to be multi-cloud or cloud agnostic uh, is an important thing to get out on the table
Get
right
out
away,
right away,
right?
and yeah.
Because you're going to make different decisions on how you containerize, whether or not you use serverless capabilities like Amazon Lambda or Azure Functions and things like that,
Mhm.
native databases. There are a number of decisions you're going to have to make that will be driven from that. And those decisions also have costs. And like I said, going from cloud agnostic or cloud native to agnostic or multi-cloud is a very large leap, right?
Yeah.
We did an assessment for an organization who was interested in being able to do their um, data and analytics capability on multiple clouds. They
Mhm.
wanted to be able to say, "Oh, we might have a customer who wants it on Azure, so we want to be able to just deploy it on Azure and have it run." Right? Well, you're talking a completely different set of tooling. You can't leverage the tooling that the clouds bring to the table for you that are highly optimized. And we were looking at a cost just to build it out of 3 to 5x,
Mhm.
just to build it out. That's not including increased cost of long-term maintenance,
Yep.
right? So when you're planning for it, you really need to make those decisions up front. It's always a good idea to build adapters around anything that is specific, because even when you're in cloud native, right? Amazon SQS is what it is today to do queuing. They might come out with a new capability in the future, right? And you're like, that's a much better capability, but because my SQS is like spread everywhere in my code, it's going to be very painful
Yes.
for me to make that change, right? If I can isolate that, make it simple to change, I actually reduce my tech debt. Right? Because now, the cost might be $5 to make the change. I'm exaggerating here, rather than $500, right?
Yep.
Or $500 rather than $50,000, to make that change, and timeline, et cetera, so that your technical debt overall cost is much lower by taking those kinds of approaches.
Yeah, and really taking that architecture mindset in from the very beginning instead of just trying to hook everything up and making it easy. So,
yep, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So we are just a couple minutes past time. So I want to thank everybody who has been listening today Thank you all very much. We hope you did learn something new today out of our session. If you like what you're hearing from us, please follow us on Twitch, and we will let you know when new episodes are coming up. And let's see. I think that's about it. Next week, same time, and we will have another interesting topic out there for you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if guests want to come, definitely reach out. So
absolutely, we're always looking for people to join us as guests and provide some more opinions and points of view. Awesome. All right, everybody. Until next time, thank you very much.
See y'all.